is the Managing Director of Riverlake, a Swiss shipbroking company, Mr. Bello Tukur. Thank you very much, Mr. Tukur, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, shipping transports about 90% of global trade, so it's the most important means of getting goods in bulk from one place to another. So tell me, how much of impact has COVID-19 had on the shipping industry, particularly here in Nigeria?
Okay, so we've seen the global economy shrink. So a lot of the trade volumes have reduced drastically. So of course, that also impacted significantly on all the segments, from the tankers to dry bulk carriers, as well as the containers. In the short term, the tankers have seen a spike in rates, which of course was also due to the fallout of the OPEC plus countries. Now that we're beginning to see the effects of these cuts as the global economy is beginning to open, we're slowly seeing freight rates actually dropping. On the products shipments, as we have a lot of countries all under quarantine or lockdown, not many people are flying all over the world, so that has really impacted very negatively on movements of jet cargoes. On the containers, in the medium term, we expect to see Chinese backlog of shipments would probably help that container segment. So that should probably happen in the short to medium term. As regards to the dry bulk, the Cape sizes that moves a lot of the iron ore, mostly to Chinese steel companies, has been greatly affected, and the rates have really plunged.
Now, can you really put a figure to it? Can you quantify the losses, made by this industry as a result of this pandemic?
Well, the losses are quite significant. Currently, in Nigeria, for example, we have a lot of congestion in the terminals, but that's because not many goods are moving. That has really impacted a lot on terminal operators. Also, we have quite a lot of waiting time as most ships come into high impact areas, especially in the Mediterranean, like Italy and Spain, are sort of required to be quarantined for about 14 days before coming into port. So the impact has been quite significant.
Okay. Now, looking at these impact, and of course, I know that companies such as yours, shipping companies, must have lost quite a lot of money. What is insurance like? Is there any insurance compensation for losses resulting directly or indirectly as a result of COVID-19?
Well, I would say most of the losses will probably be due to most of the manufacturing companies who have sort of shut down. As regards to shipping itself, some order cancellations have been made, so we don't expect to see a lot of ships actually added to the order book this year. So in terms of the shipping outlook for this year, it's been reduced drastically, and we would see further reduction when the International Energy Agency outlook is also reforecasted for the rest of the year.
Yeah, you talked about quarantining some of the people entering for about 2 weeks. Yes, in late March, when about 6 COVID-19 cases were discovered in a particular vessel, the Nigerian government now imposed some kind of stringent measures on cargo traffic, allowing only vessels that have stayed there for about 2 weeks. Tell us about some of the measures that have been taken at the seaports in terms of safety, either by government or by the shipping companies, to actually ensure that cases of COVID-19 don't increase.
Well, so a lot of the shipping companies already have their safety measures that they operate on, because in 2014 we had the Ebola crisis across West Africa. So that sort of gave a sort of idea of how to go about these pandemics. Most ships, like I said, that are coming from like high impact areas are required either at sea. You have to be at sea for a minimum of 14 days. But if you come into port and you have to report that you'd have no cases on board. And of course, we have the port health authorities as well who actually come on board in case there are any cases of the coronavirus on board the vessels.
Okay. Now, during the lockdown, the ports were allowed to operate, but that operation came with some kind of regulations. What was most challenging for shipping companies such as yours at this time?
Well, the major problem that we've encountered is mostly to do with delays. So, well, we'll see where that will probably take us, because there might be a lot of cases as regards to ships that were delayed from coming in due to limited port activity. But of course, as you know, not many people were really doing any form of trade, so that was greatly impacted.
Now, in every bad situation, of course, there are opportunities. So what lessons did you learn from this COVID-19 pandemic? And are there some, wins for COVID-19, from COVID-19 for the shippers?
Well, those involved in the tankers, especially those on the crude, in the past month or so, we saw a spike in rates. But of course, that was very short term. In the medium term now, or long term, we're seeing those rates actually beginning to crash as a lot of the economies have moved, and also with the OPEC cuts now really coming into play. So we're beginning to see some sort of easing of activity across the globe.
So with this easing of activities across the globe, and of course gradual coming back, to normalcy, but what is doing business like for you now?
Well, business has been it's been positive and negative, so it's been relatively okay. But then, of course, like we said, a lot of the impact we'll probably see in the next couple of weeks or couple of months. That will actually determine how the shipping industry is really going to look. But then, good thing is a lot of the order books this year we're not really expecting to see a lot of ships being built, because a lot of the yards at the moment are not taking a lot of orders. Due to that, so hopefully, when the Chinese Chinese shipyards actually open, we might probably see some more orders for next year.
Now, as someone that has been in this business for years, are there steps to be taken for a shipping services company who perhaps wants to stay in business during this time?
A lot of them have had some sort of savings, because the cost of bunkers now are a little bit less. So even in terms of rates, the way we look at this year, they'll still probably stay between break-even rates. So it's not been too bad for some segments. Of course, some of the other segments that have been greatly affected, like the offshore support industry, where they had a lot of contracts that were cancelled. So that will probably take a bit of time to recover.
So going forward, how can the shipping industry in general prepare for unexpected situations like this so they can avoid maximum business failure? Of course, nobody saw this COVID-19 coming.
Well, we don't really. Well, that would depend on the global economy. So now.
But businesses would have to now, I'm sure a lot of businesses must have learned, from this situation, that they have to prepare for the unexpected.
Correct. So at the moment, shipping already has a lot of safety systems that we normally operate on. So in terms of crew safety, that has always been top priority, so that has never been a problem. But in terms of commercially, in terms of earnings for ships, we would probably know that a little bit more towards the end of the year, when we see the effect on the global economy. So that would actually determine what impact it will have on the entire shipping industry.
Okay, so what can you tell us about infrastructure development and revenue generation at Nigeria's seaports?
We have not really had major port development in Nigeria since probably the late 1970s and the early 80s. So that has sort of put a lot of pressure on a lot of our current infrastructure that we have.
And what do you think are the major challenges there?
Well, they've been, the government has did a port concession in 2006. Of course, that has had some sort of positive impact. But however, there's still a lot of areas where it's still government controlled, especially the areas of dredging and the areas of pilotage, which is still controlled by the government. So maybe there needs to be like a review of that port reform that actually happened, maybe to try and see if a lot of ports can go private to be able to drive a lot of investment.
All right, now importers have often complained about the demurrage being charged by shippers. Did that also apply during this COVID-19 pandemic lockdown? Or there was a standstill to it?
Oh, no, definitely not. For the ship owners, of course, because as whoever it is, whether you're a commodity trader or an oil trader who is responsible for your own trade, you are the one that determines which ports your ships go to. So in that case, whatever you've agreed on the contract has to be honored. However, I know the Nigerian Shippers Council advised that there won't be any demurrage payments for container stock in terminals. So that remains to be seen. But in terms of on the commercial ships, you have to pay those demurrage bills.
All right. Now, recently, the federal government has allowed other petroleum marketers to import petroleum products. So it's not only the NNPC now that have the monopoly to import petroleum products into the country. So what are the bright spots for shippers in this?
Well, NNPC is still pretty much strong in terms of imports, especially for the gasoline. On the gas oil and on the jet fuel, that's still controlled by other independent marketers who can actually bring in their products. Yes, shipping demand, if I look at our data, has been relatively steady, but of course at the peak of the lockdown, we saw a spike on rates, which was of course global. However, in Nigeria, it was mostly driven by actually the price of the oil at the time. So a lot of the marketers were looking to bring in these products so they could take position by the time the company starts to ease down the lockdown, so they can make hefty profits on the trade.
Okay, now, more trade, of course, equals more revenue. Nigeria's seaports, are relatively small for modern vessels, to load or discharge liquefied products and bulk cargoes. And Nigeria waterways are really, not deep enough for the navigation of ultra-modern vessels. What's your suggestion on how this can actually be tackled?
Well, we need to, like I said, we need to look at the port reform that was done 14 years ago. That needs to be revisited. A lot of some of the concessionaires that have actually invested quite a lot of money in terms of cargo handling equipment have not really seen massive benefits from their investment. There is definitely a need for dredging and removal of wrecks. So we have a lot of wrecks around the ports and the harbor area, which doesn't help navigation and doesn't make the ports very safe. So, of course, the Nigerian Ports Authority have taken a lot of steps in terms of removing the wrecks, but there's still a lot more to be done.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Tukur, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Bello Tukur is the Managing Director of Riverlake Company, a Swiss shipbroking company.